Good evening, everyone. It's again a pleasure to be here in the Bet Midrash. We join together all the Nordic countries in this very special virtual Bet Midrash. I prepared something I prepared my shiur, and the subject is, I was told that we've been learning about Emunah already a few times. I've spoken about Emunah, about trust and belief in God, and I was thinking what to speak about, and somebody suggested the idea of tefillah, of prayer, which is an important part of Emunah. So I prepared a whole shiur on it. Now, just literally a few minutes ago, I received an email, text that I heard the news of the passing of a tzaddik, of a man who was very much a man of Emunah and a man of Tefillah, Rabbi Shmuel Solomon, a very great Rebbe in America, in Lakewood. I never actually had a personal connection with him, but he used to be a Rebbe in Gateshead, which is the yeshiva in England where I learned, and all my teachers were his students, and I have his books, and I learned a lot from his books, so this should be Leilui Nishmato. I think the funeral was this morning in America, and the body was transferred to Israel, and I think it's a very special Hashgacha Pratit that I chose to speak about Tefillah, because this was something that he put a lot of emphasis on, gave many speeches about, and wrote a lot about the importance of Tefillah with concentration, the importance of belief and trust in God. It should be the
Shmuel. Shmuel, just something that you just mentioned, which might not be so obvious to all of our Talmidim here, in terms of what you just said, that you can have a funeral, right, in one place, and then the minhag, the custom of burying or the body being transferred all the way to be buried in the Holy Land. And it shows in a way how Eretz Israel has served as our spiritual center. It was the dream for many throughout the generations to have the merit of being buried, that your body goes back to the holiest place in the end of the Holy Land. And today also it's very special for those, especially for tzaddikim, like you mentioned, that it's a special merit that you go and that the person, many people might think, oh well, isn't it nicer that you be buried next to your family? But for people of high virtue like tzaddikim, for them it's their spiritual essence in which they want to be buried in the Holy Land. And that is something which is possible. We've had in Sweden, for example, those who have asked for that, and especially in these days, I'm just reflecting or adding on what you said, especially in these days, we realize how much the Holy Land is central for all of us. In so many, we can't go on in our days without knowing what's happening there right now. So in that sense, also spiritually, it's a center for us. And it's an added reflection, I think, in these days in terms of emunah, that there's something beyond the circle or the small world that we live in that we are connected to.
Thank you for your words. Yes. So, to get the subject of tefillah, of prayer, it actually takes me back when I started my position here in Finland 4.5 years ago. I was an assistant rabbi for Rabbi Leifson at that time, and very soon after I started, there was Corona, and everybody said, "No, there's demand for shiurim or lectures about emunah, about faith." And that time already I spoke about prayer. So the Finnish crowd here might say that they remember some of the things I said, but don't worry, I got some new things as well. I want to start with a little linguistic discussion. I know people here speak different languages. I thought to just start and think about what is prayer in your own language. In Finnish, it's rukous. In English, it's prayer. Well, how do you say it in Swedish or in Norwegian? What languages people speak here?
Bön.
Bön. Okay.
Bön.
So,
In Swedish.
what is it in Swedish?
Bön.
Bön. Okay.
It's
Danish, but it's the same. Yeah.
Okay. So, when you, in most languages, somebody's giving me in Thai language. Okay, very good. The reason why I want to ask you is because from my experience, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, if it's not the case in your languages, prayer in most languages that I know, prayer has a connotation of asking, of pleading. When you think to pray, you make connotation in your head is praying for mercy, begging. When I think prayer, I beg you. Rukoilen, pyydän. In Finnish, you would say like I'm begging you for help, like pardon me. You imagine like a slave crying to a king, maybe that please, like take me out of this problem. That's the first connotation that comes to my mind when you think of prayer. In English, posher, upper class, like maybe a bit literary language. Sometimes, like you say, somebody speaks, pray, tell, like pray, like please. That's a connotation of asking. And why is this interesting? Because when you go to Lashon HaKodesh, you go to Hebrew, and Hebrew, the holy language, according to our tradition, is the language in which the world was created, and is therefore very essential to know what the words are in Hebrew. The word for prayer is very different and has completely different connotations. Who knows here? How do we say prayer in Hebrew?
Tefillah.
Tefillah. Very good. Tefillah. Okay? Now, the root of tefillah, okay, I can see there's a lot of languages coming here. Very good. So, the root of tefillah and to pray is lehitpalel. So, the root in Hebrew always, we look for the root of the word. The root is pei lamed lamed, palel. Palel. What does this root mean? Usually it's connected to law, to judging. Somebody does an avon plili, a crime against the law. Yeah, okay, to the law, to judging. Very different connotation. Not really a connotation of begging or asking. More like a connotation of weighing or judging, or that's for just one point to notice before we start the shiur. Another interesting thing is lehitpalel, the verb to pray, is what we call in Hebrew in English we would say a reflexive verb. It's a verb that goes back to yourself. Yeah, leitrachetz is to have a shower. Lehitkaleach would be to shave. It's something that you're doing to yourself. Yeah, lehit usually means I'm doing something to myself. So it's quite interesting. Why should praying be something I'm doing to myself, right? Praying, you would think, is very much asking God. Like you're begging God. You're talking to God. Why is it now suddenly turned towards myself? So these are maybe just two little questions to start with. And perhaps when we move forward in the shiur, perhaps we'll come to some sort of answers. to these questions and give an appreciation on what is tefillah. And before we jump into the sources, I wanted to make perhaps a point about prayer and to think about what's prayer for us today in Judaism, and then we'll jump to the sources and see, is that what it's meant to be? Because the way many of us feel is like prayer is a really big ritual in our religious life, right? You come to the synagogue to pray. There are certain prayers in our book which we say at certain times of the day, at certain moments, before eating, after eating, before sleeping. There are holidays where a big part of the festival is the special prayers that we say in the synagogue. And a lot of people even who don't know so much about Judaism, but you know, synagogue, that's what people connect with Judaism, the prayers. It seems like a very essential and very much a ritual, a certain system that has to be done in a certain way according to certain rules. And the truth is not just true about Judaism. If you have friends from other faiths, or you have studied world religions, you'll notice prayers often take a very central role in religious life. Just another point to consider. Why is that? Now, let's look. Okay, give me a second. I will just do this and get us to the okay. I'll share a screen and I'm going to take you to a book called Sefer HaMitzvot, the Book of the Mitzvot, written by Maimonides, the Rambam. Yeah, the Book of Mitzvot written by the Rambam. As many of you might know, we have in the Torah 613 mitzvot, and this is a statement that's already found in the Talmud, that there are 613 commandments in the Torah. But the Talmud doesn't tell us what exactly are the 613 commandments. That means you've got the text of the Torah. And the Talmud claims that inside this text you can find 613 commandments. And many rabbis or commentators have tried to enumerate them and say what is mitzvah number 1, what is mitzvah number 2, what is mitzvah number 3, and calculate them, so to say, and create lists of mitzvot. And I think perhaps the most famous one of those is the Rambam. Maimonides, in his Sefer HaMitzvot, which was one of his first books, he enumerates the mitzvot. Interestingly, just as a side point, does anybody know in which language Sefer HaMitzvot was written? I'll tell you I'll give you a hint, it's not Hebrew. The original Sefer HaMitzvot is not Hebrew. Anybody know?
Yeah. Yes, Aramaic.
No, very good guess. Lot of our texts are in Aramaic.
Arabic.
Or others.
Aravit.
Oh, what did you say?
Aravit.
Aravit, yes, Arabic. Yeah, it's an interesting. The reason I'm just pointing it out is because now we're going through a very tough conflict with our Arab neighbors. But there have also been times in our history when the relations with the Arabs were quite friendly. The Rambam lived through different times. He also suffered from certain types of, in his youth, of certain types of hostile Muslims, but there was also a very long time in his life when he lived in Egypt and was in a high position as the Sultan's doctor, and there was actually quite a friendly cooperation with Muslims. And the language of the Jews was Arabic, and a very big part of the Rambam's work is actually in Arabic. So I don't speak Arabic, so I use the Hebrew translation or the English translation, but it's a good point to know that a lot of these texts were actually written in Arabic. Anyways, this Sefer Mitzvot, I'm looking at mitzvah number 5. Do I have a volunteer here? Somebody would like to read a bit of in English?
I can
Yeah,
read.
I can read.
Okay, please. That is.
Okay, I don't know who said first, but I can do it. That is that we are commanded to serve him. And this command is repeated several times. His saying, and you shall serve the Lord your God. And his saying, and you shall serve him. And although this command is from the inclusive commands, as we explained in Principle 4, it nevertheless has specificity, since it is the command to pray.
Okay, can you just stop for a moment? I'll let you continue soon. I just need a little bit to explain what Maimonides is talking about here exactly. So he says there's a commandment in Torah to serve God. And he says you shall serve the Lord your God, and you shall serve him. We see it in many, many places in the Torah. And then he's asking a question on himself. He mentions Principle 4, if you're wondering what that is. The Rambam, Maimonides, he's actually got a list of principles on how do you define what is one of the 613 commandments. There's a lot of statements in the Torah in many different forms. There are stories, there are accounts, there are conversations. How do you know what exactly qualifies as one of the 613 commandments? And one of the rules, one of the principles that he has is that a general rule, that just a rule that applies to all the mitzvot, doesn't really belong on the list, because it's not a mitzvah of its own. It's a general mitzvah that applies to all the mitzvot. So in this particular case, he's saying that really serving God is a general principle. It's not one specific thing, like I'm putting on tefillin, or I'm putting coins in a tzedakah box, or I am, I do whatever I need to do. I keep kosher. That's a specific mitzvah, which is in the 613 commandments. But this sort of general saying I have to serve God is not one of the 613 mitzvot, because everything I do is serving God. When you put on tefillin, you're serving God, and when you love your fellow as yourself, you're serving God, and it's all serving God. So really, this should not be on the list. That's what the Rambam is saying. But then he says, however, I've still put it on the list. Why? Since it is the command to pray. This serving God, which is really a general principle, is also something very specific. It's prayer. Okay, continue and see how he explains it. The language.
Yeah, the language of the Sifrei is "and to serve him," that is prayer. And they also said "and to serve him," that is Torah study. And in the Mishnah of Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, they said, "From where do we know that the essence of prayer is a commandment? From here, you shall fear the Lord your God and you shall serve him." And they said, "Serve him through his Torah, serve him in his temple." This means direct yourself towards it, to pray towards there, as Shlomo, peace be upon him, explained.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. So he brings different Sifri, Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer. These are different rabbinic sources from the Talmud or from the times of the Talmud or a bit earlier, which are explained in different verses in the Torah. And they translate this word la'avod, to work, to serve God, as prayer. Not only prayer, as we see, serving God can also be Torah study, it can be many things, but it is definitely part of it is prayer. And therefore the Rambam, Maimonides, puts prayer as one of the 613 mitzvot. Now, it's a very interesting piece of Rambam, because the Rambam is very, I don't know if it's rationalistic, scientific, or organized, but his whole style is very much to organize the Torah, to organize this sea of the Talmud, which has a lot of discussions and opinions and one statement in this book and another statement in another book, and he tries to organize everything very logically. Chapter this law, let's go, what's the general principle, what are the details? But here, the Rambam is sort of saying, well, this shouldn't really be here, because serving God is just a general principle. It's not really a specific mitzvah. But then he says, well, actually it is, because it's prayer. So it's a bit unclear here. What is this avodah? What is this? Is it that there is a mitzvah to pray? Just that there is a mitzvah to put on tefillin, there is a mitzvah to give tzedakah, there is mitzvah not to wear mixture of wool and linen in the same clothes, whatever it is, the lots and lots of mitzvot to get married, to have children. Or is it just a general statement, serve God, and all the mitzvot together are called serving God? And he doesn't negate either side. He starts saying it's a general principle, it doesn't really belong here. But actually it is something very specific, it's prayer. And it seems from here that prayer is a very different type of mitzvah than our other mitzvot. It's almost like there's something bigger called serving God, and prayer is like the way you express that. You express the fact that you're a servant of God. That's the picture I get, at least, from reading this piece of Rambam. At this point, of course, it's important to note already at this point, we're not talking about the Siddur that we have, right? The Siddur is, and the Amidah, and the blessings there, and before, all these things are obviously something later that are not in the Torah, yeah? The Talmud tells us that after the Jews came back from Babylon and the men of the Great Assembly, they instituted the 18 blessings of the Amidah, and that was something rabbinical. And on that, everybody agrees that was a rabbinic enactment, which prayers to say in which order and which time and how, right? But here he's just talking about the concept that you have to pray, that there's an obligation for a Jew to pray. What's that based on? Well, it's not based on anything clearly written in the Torah. It's an interpretation or a tradition that these words in the Torah, to serve God, means prayer. Not what prayer, not how much prayer, just prayer. Okay, that is the Rambam explanation of the matter. Just give me a tiny little break. I'll be with you in a minute. Okay. Sorry about that. So we've covered the Rambam's explanation on prayer. Now I'm going to show you a little note on this. This one is only in Hebrew, but doesn't matter. We don't need to read all of it anyways. I just want to show you what it is, and I'll explain to you what he says. There is the Ramban. So if the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, is Maimonides, who I'm sure many of you have heard of, the famous great rabbi, was also a doctor and a philosopher, many things. There's another great rabbi, just a little bit after him, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, or Nachmanides, or Ramban. Very similar names, but actually quite different styles and approaches to many things in Torah. So he had different ways of counting, different ways of understanding the 613 mitzvot. And he wrote different, you could call them attacks or critiques of the Rambam. And here he goes to a little discussion, a little objection to the Rambam. The Rambam claimed that prayer is an obligation from the Torah for every Jew to pray. And the Rambam speaks about in other places more, there seems to be a daily obligation of prayer. And then the rabbis sort of added to that obligation what are the words you have to say and how many times you have to pray, but the essential obligation is from the Torah. And the Ramban has many proofs or arguments against it. He brings from many places the Talmud that it seems to be that the obligation to pray is not based on the Torah. The Torah just says to serve God, and serving God is, like we said, a very general idea that can mean lots and lots of different things. Prayer is something that the rabbi is obligated to institute. That's basically the main gist of his long piece here. At the end of this piece, very interesting, you would expect him to just finish off and say, this mitzvah doesn't belong here, there's no mitzvah. So prayer is a rabbinical institution, it doesn't belong in the list of the 613 mitzvot of the Torah. But he doesn't say that. He does something quite interesting. If the Rambam is right, but maybe there is a basis from the Torah for this anyways. And maybe it should be counted. We can say there's a mitzvah le'et hatzarot, when there's a difficult time, a hard time. What is the mitzvah? שנאמין שהוא יתברך ויתעלה שומע תפילה, והוא המציא מן הצרות בתפילה וזעקה, והבן זה. Maybe this mitzvah still belongs here, because we could say there's a mitzvah to pray in hard times, to believe, doesn't actually even say to pray, to believe that God answers prayers and saves people from pain, from tzoros, from hardship, and understand. You understand this. Very cryptic ending, you know. He went through a lot of, how would I say, legal or deep explanations on why he disagrees with the Rambam on this verse in the Torah and that verse in the Torah. Does it really mean prayer? Does it not mean prayer? And then at the end, he doesn't bring any proof for his thesis. He sort of like throws out the whole new concept that no, there's no daily mitzvah of prayer in the Torah, but there is perhaps a mitzvah from the Torah when you're in distress, when there's a problem, to believe that God can help you and that he'll hear your prayers. So it's very interesting. I find this difference, and it sounds like almost like philosophical. It's like two definitions of what prayer is. The Rambam's definition sounds like, it's a mitzvah. It's like tefillin and tzitzit and kosher. And the Ramban sounds almost like, if you feel bad, then trust in God. And they both want to count it as the mitzvot of the Torah. But, is it a daily thing I have to do? Is it like a very subjective thing? I feel bad, I need to pray, like I have to believe. So they sound quite different. But actually, in many ways, they're very similar. Whether we go like the Rambam or the Ramban, both of these rabbis or sages, they're all coming from the same idea that it's not just an action, it's not just a mitzvah among mitzvot, and it cannot really be compared to any other mitzvah, and definitely not to the practical mitzvot that we, the actions, eating matzah on Pesach or putting on tefillin, or can't be compared to any of that. Yeah. The main idea is service of God, belief in God, and somehow prayer comes out of it as an expression of something that's deep down in your soul. Yeah? You believe in God. You believe God can help you when you have a problem. So obviously you're gonna pray. The Torah doesn't need to say anywhere. Yeah? Everybody agrees. If you open the Torah, you're not gonna find there a pasuk, a verse that say, pray. God said to Moses, pray. No, you don't find such a thing. So what do we find? We find all these expressions of serving God. And these expressions are sort of a hint to us that if you're a God-serving person, how can you not pray? Could you imagine a life of the Torah, living according to Torah, and just never opening your mouth and speaking to God? You can't imagine such a thing, because then that would sort of undermine everything else you're doing as well. It's a very nice expression that's come from the Kuzari. Rabbi Yehuda Levi, great philosopher, Jewish thinker, poet, many things. He actually preceded the Rambam. Great thinker of the golden age of Spanish, Islamic, Jewish time. And the Jews lived in Spain. Actually, Rabbi Moshe David has talked about Eretz Israel and its importance. Rabbi Yehuda Levi was a man who longed for Eretz Israel. We can talk about that another time, perhaps. He wrote poems about it. He tried to get there himself eventually. But anyways, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, when he defines what prayer is, he calls it Pri Hazman, the fruit of time. He gives a whole interesting approach. He says that for the tzaddik, for the righteous person, he does many things. He goes to work and he feeds his family and many things he has to do. But the fruit, everything else is branches. The main, the best part of his time, the purpose of everything is the time he prays to God. And I think this sort of fits beautiful in everything we've said. Is you have this whole life of trying to be the best possible person you can be a servant of God. But where does that all come out? It comes out in your prayer, because that's when you actually have a conversation with God and say, this is what I'm doing. And if you don't have that fruit, you have a very nice tree, but you don't have the purpose. You're not showing in any way that everything I'm doing goes back to Hashem, and you lose focus. So that's really the picture of what tefillah is. And we've been talking about Emunah, I understand, for many, many weeks in this Bet Midrash. So in prayer, tefillah is the expression of Emunah. And I was away. I was in England by my in-laws the last couple of weeks on holiday. And Baruch Hashem, very strong Jewish community, minyan every day, 3 times a day. And I noted, because of what's happening in Israel, everybody's adding tehillim, adding psalms, adding things at the end of their daily prayers, shacharit, mincha, ma'ariv. And just a strong thing you were talking about, the connection we all feel to Eretz Israel, you know. It's you're going through your routine, you're doing the things you always do, but people are adding a few things to say, adding a few things to say about Eretz Israel, and that's a connection that all Jews have to each other. I think it's a very strong thing, and you know, it seems like a small thing. Some people are going to get criticized. Now, what are you doing? That's all you're doing for Israel. Like you're just adding a few words in your prayer. Of course, if you can do something practical, whether it's in volunteering, whether it's in financially, whether it's anything, of course you should do that as well. But actually, the idea that our Jewish people are in your mind the whole time, that's you know, that's quite a strong thing. And that even though this war has been going on for a few months now, we haven't lost the contact to it, and we've made these prayers as part of our routine. I think that shows something, that we are not okay. We feel that we are in this etzara, we are in this difficulty, however geographically distant it might be from what's actually going on the terrain. I wanted, before I open soon I'll give some time for questions and final discussions from everybody. I want to address one point, which I just think whenever you talk about prayer, you can't really avoid it. And you know, as we said, prayer in the Torah is one thing. Whatever it is, it's an obligation. It is not an obligation. It was just whatever it is. There's a prayer in the Torah. And then there's what the rabbis instituted, like we said, the Siddur, Shacharit in the morning, Mincha in the afternoon, Ma'ariv in the evening, all sorts of prayers and all sorts of different things, and prayer before you travel and prayer when you arrive. And I remember already quite a while ago, me and Rabbi Yair from Denmark, we gave a shiur on a piece of Pirkei Avot together, and there it came out this whole discussion that basically prayer is meant to be this amazing thing that like pours out from your heart, and practically it's a routine thing for most of us. We just open the book, and just like you have to do lots of different mitzvot, so one of them is you have to say certain words in Hebrew however many times a day at the right times in the right place. So I think a question many have on their mind is why did the rabbis, why did the sages create something like this? Why did they create a system which sort of seems to take away the purpose of the prayer? You know, if we would just follow what's written here, you know, maybe once a day, or maybe just, you know, talk to God in your own words, or only when you feel really bad and something's disturbing you, that's when you speak to God. Maybe our prayer would be more truer than, you know, if we just go through a routine of saying things. And I think this is a shiur of its own, you know, it's not really something we can now cover in a few minutes, but I just want to share a beautiful idea from my Rebbe, by Zimmerman, who taught me and who tested me when I became to become a rabbi and so on, which he didn't say it concerning prayer. He was talking about something else, about Shabbat, but I think it also gives us a bit of an idea for prayer. In the laws of Shabbat, there's a lot of things which are forbidden from the Torah. There are also a lot of things which are not forbidden from the Torah, but the rabbis of the Talmud forbade them for all sorts of reasons. Often because they could lead to something which is forbidden from the Torah. One of these things that they forbade, and this is very early, it's already at the end of the Bible, it was Nehemiah, you can read it there in the book of Nehemiah, towards the end of the Bible. He forbade business on Shabbat. It's interesting. Really, business is not a melacha. It's not one of the 39 types of work which are forbidden on Shabbat. But writing is one of those melachot. And usually when you do business, if we allow buying and selling, it will very easily lead to people writing a receipt or so on. It also lead to carrying, perhaps, you know, to carry objects on Shabbat. So if you buy and sell, you know, the natural thing is to take the objects home. Whatever it is, that's that's the prohibition. Now, if my Rebbe was saying, let's take a step back. What was it like before this decision was taken? Before the time of Nehemiah. Let's take the time of Moses, or to the time of Isaiah the prophet, times of King David. What do we imagine was going on? It wasn't forbidden to go shopping on Shabbat. So what? So everybody went shopping? Everybody went to the shop on Shabbat? And they just didn't write a receipt? Like, is that what Shabbat looked like? It's very hard to believe that that's what Shabbat was. I mean, just if we think logically, I think it's pretty obvious that everything we know about Shabbat being a holy and spiritual day, the idea of going shopping is just the opposite of that. And the explanation I thought was so beautiful is that in earlier generations, there's so many things that were obvious to people. You don't need a law to forbid this. This is Shabbat. How can I go shopping on Shabbat? Shabbat is such a holy day. It's the day I'm with God. It's a day I'm concentrating on spiritual things. It's a day I'm with my family. It's so many things. I'm going to go shopping. The question didn't come up. And it was only after 70 years of exile in Babylon that the Jews didn't have this natural connection. They didn't have the temple. They didn't have the same thing. And they coming back and they're just thinking, okay, if it's not forbidden, let's do it. And they've lost some sort of feeling. And I'm wondering whether perhaps you could say the same about prayer. I think definitely you could say the same about prayer. The earlier generations, prayer was so obvious. It was so, there were prophets walking around at the time of Moses. Of course I pray. How can a day go by without prayer? But the less spiritual we became, the more we felt like, so do I have to do it? Is it something I have to do? If it's not something I have to do, so then okay. So I'll just let days go by without prayer. So sort of, we've lost a lot through the system of specific prayers in the Siddur, and it's not ideal, but it ensures that every Jew still has a connection to prayer. I think that's something very powerful and very important. And, perhaps we've lost a lot because from the concentration, the meaning of our prayers, because they've become to many of us a bit of a routine. But I think these moments when we're tried and difficult is definitely a moment to think again about what is the root of prayer, where does it really come from, and to think about the fact that what's really expected from us is not how many words in Hebrew we said and what speed and at what time, but in the essence of it, what's really important is that you like the Ramban says, you believe in God, like the Rambam says, you're serving God, and that everything else in your day is really supposed to be in line with what you said in your prayers. That was the whole idea. Anybody wants to ask any questions, please. Comments? Okay, Paola.
No, it's
It's Yaakov. It's the same.
It's Jacob. Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
and Yaakov.
Hello?
Please, hello, yes?
Can I ask?
Yeah,
Please ask.
You said that tefillah is the word of laflil. It's mean I accuse myself.
Oh, very good. Right. So yeah, we didn't have a chance to so much go back to this, but I think now that we've gone through the whole shiur, I think it's very clear that in the center of tefillah is this emunah, is this belief in God, and in a way you're sort of also, so you're reflecting back on yourself, and you're also judging. Accusing is a strong word, but you're judging, you're weighing, what is my life? Is it a life of fear of God? And is everything I do in line with that? Am I a servant of God? And that's another part of tefillah, if you want, is the fact to understand that the tefillah is something very inner and something very much inside you. And it's not really something outreach that God needs, right? Because God is, God doesn't need your prayers. He knows what you're thinking before you even say them. But a person needs the prayers in order to be a servant of God. And prayer is actually a moment when you can, based on how true your prayers are, I think that's a very good way of judging or weighing how much of a servant of God you really are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Maybe I understand the word filah. I don't know how to express it, but you started with Maimonides, and then you told us that he used the general rule, was logical in a way. That's true. Okay? And is that the line to filah, the word filah, in a way, to make this, to keep the prayings, the general law of Judaism, if you are a little bit religious, then you make your prayings. And is the word filah, I don't know if I understand it, but is there a line from Maimonides' logical way of handle it to filah?
Okay, thank you.
I can't express it more.
No,
in English.
I think you're saying something quite interesting, because we've seen a lot
do you
here
understand what I said?
No. If I understood correctly, you're saying that if tefillah and palel and itpalel is connected somehow to judging, or maybe it's connected also to this idea then of a rule, of something that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite interesting, right? You're saying so. If according to you, it's perhaps not just that. Prayer has to be a rule, a daily rule, as a negative thing, but perhaps as a positive thing. That tefillah is sort of something very necessary and logical, like you said. I think it's a very logical step to take for a believing person, or yeah, very interesting.
So there is I'm still in doubt because is there a line from Rambam's thinking to this word filah? It's a question.
Yeah, it's an interesting, because as we see here, the Torah uses the word tefillah in several places, but the Torah doesn't give a commandment to do to saying pray in those words. It speaks about service and serving God, and our sages interpret and explain it. That actually means tefillah, means prayer. So it's an interesting connection, so to say. What does the Torah require from us? So is it even possible to require something like tefillah, or maybe tefillah by definition has to be something that you sort of come to spontaneously if you're serving God. But I think that the connection is definitely there. There is a rule of prayer, or there is a rule, there's a necessity, there is something you have to do, and the word is connected to that.
Shmuel, just to add from we were just learning of the story of Yisrael or Yaakov and Yosef, and we have the root word of filalti, right there as well, and where the passage says, "Ra'o fanecha lo filalti," and I think the translation would be, "I could never have imagined, or this is beyond my dreams or my hopes to actually that Jacob would see Yosef alive." So just to connect to the many of the beautiful things that you have said in the shiur, I think that, and to the situation that we are in, that whether prayer is coming from conversation, from despair, from crying out, from asking, from seeking, from whatever it is, there has to be some hope when you are turning to Hashem. You could be in great despair, but you still have hope, because the very fact that you're talking to Hashem is hopeful in a sense, and that the end not be the same. That's something. Either you have a different understanding, or the reality changes for the better, but that there is hope in the essence of the root word of tefillah.
Beautiful. And I actually, when the parashiyot were going like 2 weeks ago, and we were learning about Yosef, and this, I didn't think I would ever see you. This is a really interesting point. It's probably a chance for another shiur, but Jacob, he's the believing man, and the sage, and the righteous man, but he didn't have, if you want, the imagination to see where is God's salvation, where is God's help in this situation, until eventually everything opens up. But they're saying a good point, that tefillah has to have, you have to have that imagination. You have to be ready to believe that anything is possible.
Thank you. Yes.
Rabbi Shmuel, may I ask about this? That we women and men, we have a little bit. Men have more time-bound mitzvot, and am I too extreme if I don't want to eat breakfast before I pray? Because I feel like my day is going better if I just dip a little bit water, and then I go brachot ha-shachar and brachot ha-Torah, brachot ha-shahar, and then Kiryat Shema in the morning. So it's like, I don't know how the married women are doing it. So I'm very interested how the married women are like doing the praying, because how is it differ? Because like the morning prayers, it's even said that one could even praise any time. And I feel like, well, morning is morning and afternoon is afternoon, if you've got my point.
Okay, so you're asking a question in halacha about women's obligation to pray. Right, so the general rule, we were just looking at the Rambam and the Ramban, the concept of prayer that's in the Torah, that applies to everybody. Everybody should pray, definitely Jewish people, and it doesn't say that non-Jewish people have to pray, but definitely I think prayer is a universal, strong concept for everyone. The specificities of prayer that the rabbis instituted at specific times, in specific ways, and to pray with a minyan ideally, and so on, there'll be a difference, because women are not obligated in what is time-bound. So whereas women should pray, the obligation to pray shachrit, mincha, ma'ariv 3 times a day, or the obligation to attend a minyan, if there is a minyan available, is not compulsory on women. However, definitely, a woman who wants to can pray all the 3 prayers if she wants to. There's no reason why not. And then you asked about another point. There's an idea not to eat before you've prayed. And again, that concept is a concept which Talmud says, which the basis of it is that you put God ahead of your physical needs. So I think that's a concept that applies to everyone. Now, for a woman, like I said, there might not be the same obligation to say the Amidah and say all the things. That these are particular halachic points, we can study exactly the details of it. But the main point, definitely, if you feel that you can say all the morning prayers before you eat, that's definitely the right thing to do. But somebody who's in a situation where it's not possible, like you mentioned, a married woman with children and so on, there's a reason why the Chachamim did not put these obligations on her. So then she could only say, let's say, a short prayer, part of the blessings, and then already have breakfast to have the strength to take care of what she needs to do for the family.
Just to add, Rav Shmuel, if I may, I think that when we start our morning, we have our morning routines, and for some, it's you know, I would say a basic is going to the bathroom, for example, but brushing our teeth. There's a morning routine, and that is very basic for us to start our day. And then for some of us, it's perhaps an addiction to coffee. I don't know, with a raise of hands, how many of us can't start our morning without coffee, right? So yeah, we have a few raising their hands here. So I think if we train ourselves spiritually, then we should also be in a sense, and if we haven't had our coffee, we'll feel it. If we haven't had breakfast, we'll feel that there's a lack of something. So hopefully we train ourselves spiritually, that we haven't said, you know, conversed with Hashem in the morning, we feel that lacking. We should feel it spiritually. Therefore, the halacha is that we actually shouldn't eat breakfast before we pray. But for some, that might be difficult, and there's a Hasidic term that it's better to eat in order to pray than it is to pray in order to eat. In other words, that you don't rush through the prayers in order because you're so hungry. If you need to, then have a coffee, have something just to calm your body down, so that you can actually focus on the prayer itself. And this is especially true on Shabbat morning, I think, when we have more time. But it definitely, to have the sense that we received very strongly tonight from Rabbi Shmuel, that this is something so basic that it's a part of our everyday life and throughout the day, but definitely when we start the morning as well. So thank you. I'd like to thank Rav Shmuel for bringing us in the cycle of the tefillah and in reflection of Emunah tonight. And thank you all for joining us in this Beit Midrash, and keep praying strong and believe in our prayers that they can, you know, really change things. Like you were saying also, Rav Shmuel, that we add every prayer. Of course, we add prayers for all of Am Yisrael, for the Chayalim, for the hostages, and believe that it makes a difference, that our prayers bring us all together as one, as a people, and also Bezrat Hashem will bring forward redemption and miracles. So keep praying, all of you, and thank you, Rav Shmuel. Laila Tov likulam.
Thank you so much. Laila Tov.
Israel Chai.
Thank you.
Am Yisrael.
תודה רבה.